West Bromwich Albion are a club that, on a personal note, I've always had a mild fondness for. Growing up, being a Birmingham City fan, and growing up going to pubs and seeing West Bromwich Albion fans before and after matches, and I've always kind of felt like I've wanted them to do well. And I think it's been difficult from the outside. Can't imagine what it's like from the inside. Seeing the ownership regime of Lai Gu-chon and the I guess the instability that caused the football club, both financially and in other aspects as well. So I think it's wonderful to see in the last couple of years, first and foremost, the fact that the club has re-solidified, felt a bit more stable under Shilan Patel's ownership. And while I haven't seen Shilan Patel speak very often, whenever I have seen him speak, I've always gained that warmth towards him because of the message that he seems to promote around the importance of having a good structure and not just what's happening on the pitch on a Saturday, and the day-to-day operation, and the importance of sustainability. And I think that's a really positive thing, that West Bromwich Albion have that structural strength behind them. I think at the same time, there's also maybe a feeling that as much as it's wonderful to have that stability, and that should never be taken for granted, while the climate of English football is as it is, I also think that there's a time at which the eye maybe does start to turn to matters on the field. And I think after Carlos Corberán had done a fantastic job at the Hawthorns initially, and they looked like a very solid bet, didn't they, up until Christmas Eve last season, to finish in the top six of the Championship, because of how rarely they lost games and because of that consistency and reliability that they'd built up. They didn't replace Carlos Corberán well enough, opting for Tony Mowbray, who changed tack too much, and it ended up being a bit of a net loss. And so they're hoping that the appointment of Ryan Mason, a first-time manager who's worked at Tottenham Hotspur in the first-team coaching staff, and had a couple of caretaker stints in North London as well, they're hoping that they can unearth a future managerial great. So is Ryan Mason what he's can he live up to his billing, and can West Bromwich Albion find a route back into the Championship's top six and promotion contention? That's what we're here to discuss on this Summer Deep Dive. Yes, welcome along to EFL Debate. I'm speaking to a fan of each of the 72 clubs across the EFL between mid-June and mid-July. So if you want more of that content, you can do us a massive favour by getting subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. Delighted to be joined by Chris Hall from Albion Analysis, taking some time out of his busy new schedule of fatherhood to speak to us this evening. Thanks so much for your time, Chris. I appreciate it.
It's all right, mate. You've got me out of changing nappies, so I'm not going to complain.
Maybe in future you'll give me a call and say, Gav, can you get me on the podcast?
Although let's remember that my missus has access to this feed, so let's not speak publicly about such nefarious plans.
Absolutely. Chris, what's your feeling about the state of play at West Bromwich Albion at the moment? I guess the balance between the relief at having the structural side taken care of and having somebody that you feel trust in, whilst also feeling like the on-field side needs a bit of TLC.
Maybe. I think, look, part of the problem at the moment is perception and probably people's expectations for the club, because there's a lot of Albion fans who have never seen a West Bromwich Albion up until sort of recent years that is either not in the Premier League or getting promoted to the Premier League. But I think we have to realise, you obviously in your sort of preamble there, Gab, very eloquently referenced the Gauchon Lai reign. That was an enormously damaging period for West Bromwich Albion as a football club. And we are not that club that we were when, Jeremy Peace was at the helm, when Dan Ashworth was at the helm, when, we had incredibly successful periods under certain managers, when our player recruitment was extremely strong for a very, very long period of time. We're not that club anymore. We're getting back, I think, to being that club, but we're not that club. And I think, it's turning the oil tanker in the sea. Anybody who expects us to do a handbrake turn is, I think, horribly unrealistic. The problem is there will be fans out there. There'll be both EFL supporters who see the name West Bromwich Albion associated with Premier League football and expect us to always be in the mix. I personally think that we've done incredibly well over the last couple of seasons to be in the mix the way that we have. And I mean, look, it's a testament to Carlos Corberán. It's not going to be a shock to anybody that he went to Valencia and basically worked miracles and took them from almost certain relegation to the informed team in La Liga, and taking on the big boys quite successfully. He's a brilliant manager, and I think because he had us punching above our weight over the last couple of seasons, akin to what we were able to do financially, and people say, yeah, but if you look at the wage table, you were still towards the top. Yes, but we overpaid on wages. There's yes, you can. You quite. People are quite right to say that a lot of the time, when you look at the league table and you look at the wage table, there is some correlation. But there are always mismanaged clubs in there. There are always clubs that have overpaid in terms of their wages, and we were that club. We were that club who had given big contracts to players who we just shouldn't have given them to, and players at the wrong end of their careers, and we were hanging on to them way too long, and we were ending up with guys in their 30s on big contracts. We're just starting to shed those, and this is no disrespect to these people, but we paid a club record fee for Grady Diangana. I love Grady, but has he lived up to that fee? Absolutely not. We've just got him off the books. John Swift, we gave a 3-year deal to on a free from Reading, made him one of the best paid players at the football club. Again, has he lived up to his wage? I'm a fan of John Swift, but has he lived up to what we paid him? Absolutely not. So the mismanagement of Albion means that our wage bill has been something of a red herring over the last few years. The correlation between the quality that we have, the balance in the squad that we have, and what we're paying these players hasn't been there. And we're redressing that balance. And Pete and I spoke on the last pod that this is the first summer for a long time where we look at it, and we personally, myself and Pete on the pod, feel incredibly patient about this summer because we can see a real strategy and plan to what we're going about. The recent seasons have not felt like that. They felt, under Gauchon Lai, they felt incredibly reactionary, and they felt ill-advised a lot of the time. Like I say, that summer where we brought in Swift, Wallace, and Yukoslu on frees just felt like bringing in the most obvious players who are available, and the most obvious players are not necessarily the right players. And then last summer felt like doing everything as cheaply as possible to try and reduce the wage bill. It didn't seem like there was any crazy focus on sort of like bringing in the best possible players for a long-term plan. It was okay. I mean, towards the end of the window, we're able to bring in Mikey Johnston, but Hegan was excellently scouted. I think Styles had been a long-term plan, but McNair was just one that we could do because he had 6 months till he went to San Diego. Joe Wildsmith was available on a free. Devante Cole was just a cheap centre forward that we could bring in. And people like Frabotta and Ratchich, these were just gambles, really. Let's be honest. And they didn't pay off. Now, since January, we brought in Tamabani, a player that it's quite clear that we've been looking at for some time. Isaac Price, a player that we were linked with for 2 windows and brought in. Again, long-term strategy. Whilst I haven't heard any rumours previously of us going after Orna Hugaber, I think that there's probably a chance that he has been a long-term target as well. And there seems to be a little bit of there's almost long-term planning, because I think we know certain players are going to go either this summer or in the near future. And I honestly believe there's a plan to replace Tom Fellows. There's a plan to replace Torbjorn Hegem. Whether that's this summer or next summer, or even if we were to get promoted, maybe a few years down the line, I honestly believe there's a long-term plan. I don't believe that plan's ever been there. And I honestly believe we try and bring players in almost a window ahead of them having, because you look at Isaac Price, and I think he will fill, and Tamabani, I think they will fill a lot of the gap that is going to be created by Dean Garner and Swift. But we brought them in a window ahead. And that's so smart, because you bed them in and you don't have to go through that sort of scramble of them meeting the lads, getting used to the division and everything like that. So I think there's a real plan. I don't think if people are doing their 1 to 24s, as I know you will be, and to be fair, intrigued to see yours after your stunning victory last year. But I think if people are doing their 1 to 24s and they're having Albion anywhere near, I would suggest, the top 4, I think you're crackers, because I think we're probably 12 months away from possibly being able to do that. I think we're more a work in progress than that.
I'm a little bit surprised to hear you say that, Chris. I'm not going to lie.
I'm not saying top 6, we're out the question, Gab. But I think what we've seen the last 2 seasons is that top 4 pulls clear.
Right.
And I don't think what I'm saying is, I'm not saying we're not capable of a 69 to 75 point season.
Okay.
I'm saying we're not capable of an 80 point plus season.
I
don't think. And that's what it's been the last 2 seasons, to be in that top 4. We're talking an 80 point plus season. I don't think we're ready for that. I think we could, with some good signings, and if Ryan Mason comes off, then who knows? We could be one of those sort of 5th, 6th teams knocking around that sort of early 70s, mid 70s points mark. I just don't see. It would be an incredible achievement with a first-time manager and with quite a bit of turnover in the squad to be able to go this season. And when you've got teams like the 3 coming down, plus Sheffield United with parachute money, to be able to go and mix it. I struggled, and yourselves, Blues, with enormous spending power. When you've got 5 clubs like that who can probably outspend the rest of the division, possibly those 5, I would suggest, will probably outspend the other 19 teams combined. I would not be surprised. And when you've got 5 teams like that, if 4 of those 5 are not your top 4, I would be gobsmacked this season.
Interesting. So moving back to West Albion specifically, then, I mean, you mentioned that you can see a real plan in place, and I suppose what helps with that is you've got a very realistic owner in Shilan Mattel who seems to champion sustainability. You've got Mark Miles, who I think you've pointed out in this podcast as somebody who just before the takeover did some good work behind the scenes to kind of stabilise things a little bit. So he's managing director. You've got a sporting director in Andrew Nesta and a head of football operations in Ian Pearce. And I'm not sure you had either of those things going for you go back a couple of years. So that's
we had Ian Pearce. Yeah, we had Ian Pearce. But I think he needed support around him. I think I don't, I've been very critical of Ian Pearce in the past. I'm starting to wonder whether he was hung out to dry a little bit by the previous regime and a lack of support. But I think what's really interesting, like I say, is it's that collective thing. It's that togetherness of a plan. You said about Shilan Patel. He doesn't speak that often. He speaks.
No, sorry, I meant I've seen him speak in terms of I've seen him speak. I've seen a couple of interviews. I've not seen him speak loads. That was only all I meant.
No,
so.
I mean, to be honest, he speaks. He more speaks through the communications department than sit down interviews, because he is in America quite a bit. But
Sure.
but he did do an open letter to the fans the other week, just to kind of almost explain the strategy for this summer, and it was really refreshing. He was open and honest about the fact that players may have to go, that big players may have to be sold, but the message was very clear: don't panic. We have a plan to replace these guys. Player trading is a part of our model. That's been said multiple times by him and Andrew Nesta, that player trading is a huge part of our model. And it hasn't been in the past. I mean, Pete and I talked about this on the last pod, that we've had fantastic players in the past under Jeremy Peace, the likes of Ben Foster, Chris Brunt, James Morrison, Peter
Gareth
Odemwingie.
McCauley.
Yeah, well, Gareth's a little bit different because we signed him into his 30s, but Jonas Olsen would be another good example.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And the point I was sort of alluding to there is we hung on to those players, hung on to them up until the point where they were almost valueless and virtually at the point of, well, in some cases actually retired at the club, but in other cases kind of either their stock dipped a bit in the case of Odemwingie and all the problems around that, or that they got to an age in Ben Foster where kind of, he wanted to go back to the Premier League. Nobody was going to pay a big fee for him. So you kind of, when you look at those 5 players in Olsen, Brunt, Odemwingie, Foster and Morrison, to think that we only probably got about 2.5-3 million for those players, it's just not good business. And I know fans always want clubs to hang on to their best players. It's not good business. Not when you're a club our size. If you're Real Madrid, yeah, of course you can probably do that. But West Bromwich Albion need to sell players at the height of their value, which is why Tom Fellows will probably go this summer, because his value is probably maybe as high as it's going to be. I mean, there's an argument to say if he stayed another year, possibly, but is he going to have another season where he's the Championship's top assister? Yeah. That would be impressive. So maybe he's as valuable as he's ever going to be. In which case, you need to sell him. And Torbjorn Hegem, I think probably there's another season in increasing his value, which is why I would like to see him stay. But I think we have to sell these players when their value is at their maximum. For example, Caleb Taylor, a player that a lot of people at the Albion really like, I myself included. But if the people around the club don't look at him and think, you're a Championship defender, he's coming off a fantastic season at Wycombe, where he was one of the best defenders in League One. And people instantly go, one of the best defenders in League One must be able to make it in the Championship. And that's not necessarily always the case. So maybe it's the right time to sell him. Maybe he's at the height of his value.
Because I thought when I saw him quite a bit at Cheltenham Town, Chris, and he did get rave reviews there, and he was brilliant for Cheltenham. Really aerially dominant. But I did actually feel that on the ball, he was it's not like he was bad, but it's kind of so-so for that level. And so I guess for Championship level, if you want to be a high-end Championship side, that is probably the area of his game that he would have to find that extra gear in. So
and look, just on the player trading point, Gab, I think it's really important to say that the best teams in this division have done this very, very well. We can go back to your Brentfords, and they're obviously the model for this. Sure. Selling Neil Maupay at the right time, selling Ben Rama at the right time, selling Ollie Watkins at the right time, and still ending up getting promoted.
Norwich do it very well at this level as well.
Well, but I mean, I was going to go with just a couple of teams who've been promoted. Sunderland sold Jack Clark last summer, reinvested that money really, really well. A lot of people, not you, as I'm well aware, but a lot of people were expecting a drop-off from Sunderland after losing their best player. And they went again, and they went fantastically. I personally think, despite a little Mark Robbins-y blip, I think Coventry have really improved from selling Gyökeres. I think, and even Leeds United, they sold people like Archie Gray, Jorginho Ruta last summer. But again, reinvested the money really, really well. And I think it's just part of being a Championship club. I think if you don't get promoted, I think you have to sell, and you have to trade really, really well. And the big mistake we made when we came down, both times really, but primarily when we came down the first time in that Pulis, Pardew, Moore season, is that I think we hung on to too many of the players, and beyond the point of their value. I don't think that's not part of the model anymore. I think the model now is try and replace players early, ideally before they leave. Try and be very intelligent about how we're recruiting. And you look at the recruitment we've done, and bringing in Tamar Bani from Denmark. We're bringing in Isaac Price from Belgium. Ona Hegerberg from Norway, Torbjorn Hegem from Sweden, Usman Diakate from Austria. You know,
you like your heads, don't you, at West Brom? You had Big Arsley a few years ago.
Well, exactly. So, you know, there's another model. Apparently the keyboard's stuck in the Albion recruitment department. But
it's a head fund.
Yeah. Oh, good God. If it's going to go down this route, we're in all sorts of trouble. But no, I mean, I think there's a plan, and I think that's the point. I think we're planning ahead. I think we're looking for pathways as well for our young players. You know, we obviously moved Alex Palmer on in January, who for me was probably the best goalkeeper in the division. But knowing that we've got Josh Griffiths behind him, and okay, Josh didn't have the end to the season that probably Alex would have had, but I still back Josh to come back strong this season and be a good goalkeeper over a period of years. I think we're looking at pathways for people like Harry Whitwell, who is enormously well thought of at the football club. I think
where does Harry Whitwell play?
He is a central midfielder. He can sort of he's that sort of 8-10 type player. So he could play towards the top end of the midfield, or he could play that box to box role. And I think, you know, you look at someone like Harry Whitwell and you think, you know, there's possibly, I mean, potentially even if Isaac Price blows up this season, becomes absolutely phenomenal, and we don't go up, maybe you're looking at Harry Whitwell and thinking, if he has a great loan, Isaac goes next summer for a lot of money. Harry just steps straight in, and it's that planning. I look at planning. I look at a lot of things within the squad at the moment, and it's like a game of chess. I can almost see what we're doing 2 or 3 moves ahead, and by moves I mean windows, and I love that. I'm a huge fan of that. Even Hegerberg coming in. I mean, I don't know for sure that DK and Maja stay this summer, but if they do, I think at least one of them moves on next summer, because they're both out of contract. And I don't see Maja signing a new contract, not unless we go up. And maybe Hegerberg's been brought in now as opposed to next summer, so that he can completely acclimatise the division. And we almost don't need to replace one of the strikers next summer, because Hegerberg's already here. And he's had that summer, and it's that kind of planning that we've not done for years and years.
It's so refreshing to hear you speak about West Bromwich Albion in those terms, the club with that kind of vision. And I'm wondering how Ryan Mason's going to fit into that, because he sounds, all the indications are that he's an extremely talented coach. I like the fact that he's got some experience in the first team environments, because I think that can often be a big thing, because it's very different coaching first team to youth team football. Clearly a very highly rated coach, retired very young to kind of, well, by enforced, but then that allowed him to focus on coaching. So is there some excitement around Ryan Mason, and is that outweighing maybe some of the trepidation that might come, that some people might say, given that, his inexperience?
I think the initial reception to Ryan Mason was mixed. I think there was some people looking at it and going, we tried the older experienced head with Tony Mowbray. That was a disaster. So why not go to completely the other end of the spectrum, which is what we've done with Ryan Mason. I think there was other people saying, maybe we've gone from one extreme to the other, and that worries us, and should West Bromwich Albion be a club that's hiring somebody with effectively zero managerial experience? Yes, 13 games, but realistically, we're talking no first team managerial experience. And I think, look, and I'm 100% honest here. Pete and I were in that camp of should we be almost a testing ground for somebody's managerial ability? I think the majority of us, and I include myself and Pete in this, have really come around to the idea. The more we've heard Ryan Mason speak, the more clips Albion have dropped of him on the training field, because he speaks with a maturity, and I like the fact that he's made it clear he's turned down jobs in the past, that he didn't feel he was ready, that he's waited for the point where he felt his experience warranted.
That takes a bit of wisdom in itself, doesn't it, Chris?
Yeah, it does. And I think as well, he's quite self-effacing. It was interesting. There was he did the high performance pod, and
I watched that actually.
Yeah, and he was very good. And I thought there was one line where which I loved, which he came out with, where he said they said to him, like, Jake Humphries said, did you want the Tottenham job at the point at which you were caretakering for after Jose Mourinho got sacked? And he said, no, absolutely not. He said, look, the bottom line is, if I took that job, the first time I'd lost a couple of games, people would have said, oh, it's okay. It's because he's young. It's because he's young. He said, no, I don't want people making excuses for me. He said, I want to be judged the same as the guy in the opposite dugout to me. I want to be judged just as harshly as him. I don't want people saying Ryan Mason's X years old and therefore we need to take it easy on him. And I thought that's such a refreshing view on that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, some people would look at that conversation and almost say, oh, I'm going to be judged because of my age, or even take the positives off it and say, I'm going to be given more time because of my age. And Ryan Mason's saying, forget my age. That. Yeah, and he's saying, forget my age. He's basically come into West Bromwich Albion, and his attitude will be, if I lose 5 out of 6 like Tony Mowbray did, I should be judged as harshly as Tony Mowbray was. You know, forget the 40 years that sit between us. You know, or not quite that, actually. That's a bit unfair. 35 years that sit between us. I should be judged the same because, you know, I am manager of West Bromwich Albion, and it doesn't matter whether you're Ryan Mason, whether you're Slaven Bilic, whether you're Tony Mowbray, whoever you are. You need to be judged the same as a West Bromwich Albion manager. I think the way the other thing that I like about Ryan Mason is the way he talks about the game. He's not, at no point has he wedded himself to one style of play. He's actively dodged those questions, which I thought was really interesting. He's talked about just playing winning football. And I think one of the problems that we've had with Albion managers in the recent past, I think of someone like Valérien Ismaël, but also Tony Pulis to a certain degree, Alan Pardew, the other end of the scale, even Slaven Bilic when we went up to the Premier League, is a refusal to alter your style, to almost acknowledge what's going on right before your eyes, because you're such a football purist, if you like, or it's your way or the highway. I think Ryan Mason will be very much horses for courses and will realise that there will be different ways he will have to set up in different games. And I think the way he explains the game to players, I've only seen a couple of clips of him on the training field, but I understood what he was on about. And I am not a football tactician. I'm the furthest thing from it. You know, I've listened to coaches talk in the past and kind of thought that blows my mind a little bit. I'm almost struggling with it. But I also think that sometimes coaches can be too intelligent for their own good, and they can make it incredibly difficult.
They can overwhelm players with too much
information, or that they just don't explain things particularly well. Because I mean, in my day job is a university lecturer for the University of Derby, and one of the things that I found is that, you know, visual learning, whether if you can show people or you can give them something, a tangible example that they can, that it really helps them, rather than just explaining, you know, this is how something works. If you can show it to them
as well, I think is a big thing.
Yeah. And he does that. He gives real examples from the game as to what he wants players to do. And I think he's a smart coach. Will he be a success? Only time will tell. But he's got the stuff you want.
Absolutely. I think the important thing for Ryan Mason, though, I agree. I think he's an extremely talented coach, and I think there's some really positive signs. What I would love, and I've not quite had the chance to look at the staff, I might have a little look at that now as we talk, but I think he probably needs an experienced figure along. Oh, Nigel Gibbs.
Yeah. So a guy that he worked with closely as he was coming through and everything. So I think there's a real there's a real sort of experienced, steady head there with him, who's sort of been there and done it, and you know, look, there's inevitably a rookie manager, however well they understand the sort of coaching side, or however well they understand the game or the tactical side of it, there will be moments where they make a rookie mistake, and that's where you need that experienced head to come in and go, if you do that, this will happen.
Yeah.
So stop. And that's and I think that's I think he's been very smart about who he's surrounded himself with, and he also strikes me as a kind of guy who'll listen. That he is the one thing that's come across with Ryan Mason in every interview that I've watched with him is no ego. It seems like, don't get me wrong, I think he's a strong man manager, and he's not going to accept any fools, and he's certainly not going to accept any lazy people. He's made that very clear. But I don't think he walks in every day thinking he's better than everybody else at the training ground just because he's in the top job. I don't get that impression from him at all. I think where he needs to be advised, I think he will allow himself to be advised, and that's not every manager. Not every manager wants to listen.
Yeah, I think that's such a crucial thing. Let's take a look at Ryan Mason's squad then, Chris. Goalkeeping department, you're quite hopeful that Josh Griffiths could be the one to step up in Alex Palmer's absence.
Yeah, I think you have to hope that, because I don't think it's an area where we're going to do any business this summer. I'd be incredibly surprised. We've obviously got Joe Wildsmith behind him, who had something of a torrid time when he came into the Albion goal. I don't think many Albion fans would overly trust him back between the sticks. So I think we hope that Josh Griffiths has a good season. I think he's a young goalkeeper. He obviously excelled in his multiple loans in League One, most recently wowing Bristol Rovers fans. And I don't think Bristol Rovers probably would have gone down if he'd stayed the whole season. So, you watch the divisions, Gab, everybody saw the drop off in Bristol Rovers as soon as Josh Griffiths walked out the door. I think he's a talented goalkeeper, and he needs an opportunity. He needs the trust, and he was back early on a training camp with Neil Cutler put on a sort of warm weather training camp. He was out there with ex-Albion goalkeeper and now Wolves goalkeeper Sam Johnston, which I'm not necessarily sure it's a bond and a friendship that most Albion fans will be in love with, but I love the fact that Josh was committed enough to his craft to be getting in there early and trying to better himself, because he didn't have he had a mixed period, after he came in, made some huge saves, like one at the end of the game at Watford, but then would then go and chuck one in like he did against Bristol City. And, it was a real mixed period. So I think he will be looking to step up a level this season.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, again, just relating it back to the player trading model, you've got to sometimes take that bit of a chance. I don't think you can ever get that 100% guarantee that someone's going to be at the level you need if you want to have players that are going to be have that high potential and that ceiling to develop. Sometimes you've got to take a bit of a risk, and I think this could be worth it with Josh Griffiths after that first half of the season he had on loan in League One. So I think a run of games could really do him well in the Championship. What about Darnell Furlong, Chris? Bit of a stalwart for West Bromwich Albion now, isn't he?
Yeah, and I think at the point at which he signed his new contract last season, I think most Albion fans were absolutely elated with that news, because I think he'd been, under Carlos Corberán, one of our most important players. I think, the way that he's not the greatest one-on-one defender, but he tucks in really well. And I think the way he helped us in the build-up, he's great in the air. The way he can invert and pass the ball, and the way he linked up with Tom Fellows was amazing last season. His long throws, people shouldn't take them for granted. Not every player has a long throw like that, and they're a real weapon. The problem that Darnell Furlong has got is he massively let down Tony Mowbray towards the end of that season. He was criminally bad in that game against Derby County. He and Carl Bartley lost a lot of fans that day, and I think he's got some work to do to rebuild things with the support base. I don't see any way he's not here next season, because he will be a well-paid player. He's obviously on a long-term deal, having signed it midway through last season. I don't see any way somebody comes and takes him, offers a contract that works for Darnell, offers a fee that works for us. But
do you think it needs a young understudy to Darnell Furlong?
100%. We've needed that on. Yeah, we've needed that on both sides for years, Gab. We haven't. This is one of the areas where we have been appallingly understaffed. Is backup at fullback has been dreadful. I mean, basically, our backups at fullback last season were centre halves because Mason Holgate was brought in to be a centre half. He was Darnell Furlong's backup, and frankly, Holgate wasn't particularly good at playing either position. And then Hegum started the season as our left back and then moved inside and was our starting centre half. And Callum Styles went to left back. And then when Callum Styles got sent off away at Coventry, then you've got to move Hegum out of the position where he's playing every week to play at left back. It's not a good way of working. I'm all for versatile players, but if your second choice left back is your first choice centre half, that's bad because that means you might have to move your first choice centre back out of the position you want him to play for a really big game. And it's just, and that's exactly what happened against Derby County. You know, that we had that Easter weekend. Styles gets sent off on the Friday. He can't then play on the Easter Monday against Derby, and you have to move your best centre half out of centre half, and that's not good for anybody.
You don't want to do that.
We've been Furlong has not had enough competition on that right hand side. I agree with Albion fans about that. I think some of them have let the momentary bad performances and almost seemingly bad attitude that he showed towards the end of the Mowbray reign to almost colour their opinion of what Darnell Furlong has been over a number of years, which I personally think has been one of the best right-backs in the division. But when he's bad, he's appalling. And when he doesn't want to play for a manager, which seemingly was the case with Tony Mowbray, I mean, forget about it. He might as well. He genuinely might as well have not been out there against Derby County. He was that bad, and so I think he's got a problem with the supporters, and I think he will need I think he will start the season as our first choice right back. I'd be stunned if he didn't, but I think he's going to have to start the season really, really strongly to get the fans back on side because, as we all know, fan support is. You go up a ladder, but you come down in an elevator. You know what I mean? Like it can take you years and years and years to build up fan support, and you chuck in a couple of dismal performances, which is what he did over the Easter weekend, and you can lose the fans in 2 games when you've spent 2 years. And I do think he's had a really, really top 2 years under Carlos Corberán, but he lost a lot of people over those Easter weekends.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to assume things about factors behind bad performances from the outside. I'm always a little bit wary of that. But I think Darnell Furlong probably owes West Brom fans a really committed 25-26 campaign. But maybe that understudy who can come in and keep things fresh and keep them honest could be valuable. In terms of left back, what I quite liked was how you mentioned Darnell Furlong tucked into that back three, and Callum Styles is also a midfielder by trade, so he can invert into midfield very nicely, and that creates some nice a nice in possession patterns that allows Tom Fellows and Mikey Johnston to kind of hold the width.
Yeah, although the massive question mark, Gab, is that how we're going to play this season? I mean, look, we've just seen a proposed move from Mikey Johnston to Flamengo collapse. I think we all believe that Tom Fellows will probably go this summer. And you look at the business we're doing. We brought in two 10s really in January in Banny and Price, and we're not signing wingers, or we're not really being linked with wingers. Big rumours around us wanting Jeffrey Schlupp at the moment. And I mean, look, you sort of play the face a little bit. I'm not against it. I mean, I think I can see the benefit if we're playing a certain way. I mean, if you're gonna want your width to come potentially from fullbacks, or if you potentially want Schlupp to play in the central midfield as quite a dynamic central midfielder, I can absolutely say. I mean, look, this is a guy that has played at the top level for a very, very long time. Whether that's at Leicester, at Crystal Palace. I know he had a brief loan at Celtic last season, but nonetheless, I mean that's a pretty good level. Even Celtic, the SPL, I realise it's not the greatest league in the world, but you still have to be at a certain level to play for Celtic because Celtic are Celtic. And I do think that we've sort of like looked at players whose Premier League careers have stagnated and asked the question in the past, oh, well, really? We're unenthusiastic about them in the Championship. And then they come down to the Championship and you suddenly realise there's this chasm of a gap between being a Premier League footballer and being a Championship footballer, and they can look a class apart. I'm hoping, and he's only 32. So I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I must have. I think because the name Jeffrey Schlupp's been around for so long, it feels like he must be a really old player, but maybe he came through very young. So
yeah, but anyway, I mean, look, we haven't signed him yet, or not necessarily saying we're going to. But my point is, we've actually made efforts to sell one of our wingers. Now, maybe it was just because the offer was too good to turn down from Flamengo. I understand it was £5 million up front, which obviously gave us a very nice PSR boost, having paid 3 million for him last summer. So I think we would have been something like 2.75 in profit, which is in terms of PSR, which is great for us. But also, you would think if the plan was to get Mikey Johnston out the door, given that Grady's left, who was cover on both sides, really. You've got, on the right-hand side, all you've really got at the moment is an ageing Jed Wallace and Tom Fellows, the latter of which we probably expect to go. And on the left-hand side, you've got Carlin Grant in the last year of his contract, but he could also play potentially as a centre-forward as well.
Or as a 10.
Or as a 10. And Mikey Johnston. You know, we never replaced Lewis Dobbin in January, and then you'd also look at where we went with the manager search last time, and Rafael Vicky became incredibly close, and he likes to play a wingerless system. So, is the plan to go wingerless? I think that's a really, really big question with us. So, you talk about Fellows and Mikey Johnston, quite rightly, Gab, because they were our focal point last season. Everything was through them. And earlier in the season, it was Grant and Fellows. But are they going to be Mason's focal point? I'm not sure. It's still a massive question to be answered.
But what I would say, Chris, is that you basically need to. There's four. If you go wingerless, you need to almost change 4 positions, because you then not only do you need the wide players to be more cut inside wide players rather than hug the touchline wide players, certainly like Tom Fellows. You also need your fullbacks to be amazing going forward on the overlap.
Not necessarily, because and it was noticeable when we put the statement out. And look, I've been working on this hypothesis all summer, and I'm very prepared from the opening day to be completely wrong. And Ryan Mason shows up, plays a traditional 2 very wide attacking players flanking 1 centre forward, and Chris has talked absolute garbage all summer, and everybody hammers me, which is probably what's going to happen. But Mauricio Pochettino was mentioned multiple times in the statement when Ryan Mason was hired as a huge influence on Mason. I thought that was really interesting, because of all the world-class managers that Mason has worked with as a coach, he didn't work with Pochettino. He played for him, and yet Pochettino was the name that was pulled out a couple of times in the statement. And I thought that's interesting. So I went back and looked at Mauricio Pochettino's ways of playing. And yes, in these latter days, Pochettino went to 3 centre halves and the wing backs, which I think at that point were Trippier and Aurier, offering the width. But in the earlier part of Pochettino, it was a back 4. On the one side, Danny Rose gave the width. But on the other side, the width came from the second centre forward, which was Son, drifting out there. So it was like a box midfield of 2 10s of Ericsson and Ali, a deeper midfield of Dembele and Winks, And then, as I say, Rose flying up the one side, but the width on the right-hand side came from Son going out there and Kane being the central striker. And then obviously when Kane came deep, Son could go into the 9 and they could attack down the left. You know, it was quite a fluid way of playing. My point is you definitely need one fullback who can go. You don't necessarily need 2 if one of your centre forwards is very comfortable providing that width, or if one of the 10s, which both Ali and Eriksson, or possibly both the 10s, which Ali and Eriksson could do, could drift wide. And to be fair, Price has played on the wing, and so has Banny. So they could both drift wide. I would agree with you. If we're going to play wing backs, I think you have to replace Darnell Furlong because he's not a wing back. I think Styles would be fine going up that side. But I think on the other side...
by the way, Callum Styles has played left wing back for Barnsley, just to add to your point there.
Yeah, exactly. So I think he would be fine on that, but I don't think Furlong is a wing back. I think he's better inverted than he is hugging the touchline.
Agreed.
But I don't think necessarily, when you look at the way Pochettino played, that if you go wingerless, that means both fullbacks have to go.
Okay.
I think the width can come from your second centre forward or from your 2 10s.
Interesting. So the options are maybe an Isaac. Because when I did actually ask, you know what, I'm gonna go the extra mile and find the tweet, because I did tweet somebody about Isaac Price when he first signed for the Albion in January, and I think the feedback was that he's very creative, technical midfielder. Didn't necessarily score a lot of goals. Here we go. What did you think of age? So decent enough young player, been pretty reasonable for standard going to it. I'm sure there was somebody who gave me a more detailed answer. Was it a DM ACD standard? Let me see. I hope I can find this. Yes. So I can read this out for you. Got a few paragraphs on Isaac Price. Hi, Isaac Price is obviously a good footballer, but he has a lot to improve. He only scored 1 goal and delivered 2 assists in 1.5 seasons with us. That's poor for an offensive midfielder. He also still needs to develop his body because he's light in duels, and his mentality was sometimes questionable. He played a lot of games with nonchalance, and that was frustrating for us because everyone is aware of his qualities. But he has a lot of qualities, mainly vision of game and good passing. I think he can do better at West Bromwich Albion if he's put in the right situation. He sometimes had to defend a lot with us, so he had less opportunities to show himself offensively. So it sounds like there's a player of real ability that if you could put him in the right situation with the right management and in the right circumstances, could really come to light.
I have to say, the negatives that have been highlighted there, I haven't seen any of that since he came in as a West Bromwich Albion player. First of all, his attitude has been first class. The guy played every position on the pitch, outfield position, bar centre half and left back last season for us, and he only signed in January. So I mean that his versatility and his willingness to do a role for the team was unbelievable. You ask any Albion fan, second half of last season, there's only really Hegem that challenges him for best player, because Fellows struggled even a bit after Maja got injured. Fellows was unreal up until Maja got injured, but he struggled a bit in the second half of the season. Isaac Price was phenomenal. Isaac Price, what I have seen from him is unbelievable ability on the ball, calmness, a willingness to track back. There was one in I think it was the last game of the season against Luton. I'm pretty sure it was, where we get, and I think we were well ahead at this point. I think we were like, we might have been 5-1 up before Luton got a couple back, and the ball got robbed on the edge of their box, and they belted forward, and Isaac Price absolutely busted a gut and got an unbelievable block in on the edge of our box. I don't see any of this attitude that's described. I mean, look, I completely respect that people watch their team and they say what they see. Yeah. I'm not telling that person that they were wrong because they've watched their team. They're not wrong. They're right in what they've seen. What I'm saying is the guy that showed up to West Bromwich Albion has not showed any signs of delusions of grandeur or anything like that. he has been the best player on the park most weeks that he's played. He ran the game against Luton. Tom Fellows will obviously grab the headlines alongside Daryl DK for goals and assists and things like that. But the one pulling the strings all game was Isaac Price. He was absolutely incredible. He works hard. He gets into tackles. And look, I've said before that I will not be remotely surprised if come the end of the season, Isaac Price is on the Championship Player of the Season shortlist, because I think he's that good. I look at how fast Joe Bellingham took steps over a couple of years. Yeah. They're not the same player. And I completely recognize that in terms of the qualities that they have. But I look at how fast Joe Bellingham developed over a series of maybe 2.5 years. And I see the ability to develop that fast. And in Isaac Price, I think he already developed as a West Bromwich Albion player unbelievably from the day he walked through the door to the way he ran that game on the final day of the season. And I don't see any reason that he won't start the season against Blackburn in a few weeks' time and be the player that grabs the game by the scruff of the neck for us, because I just think he's a level above. And I've said it before on our pod, and I'll say it here. This will be the last season Isaac Price plays Championship football. Whether that's for West Bromwich Albion because he gets us up, or if it's because we don't get up and he has to go. But he will not. He is too good to, beyond the 25-26 season, be playing Championship football, in my opinion.
So definitely massive one to watch then there, Isaac Price. I'm wondering, do you think his role is going to be that kind of floating 10 that drifts over to the right-hand side and
left? I would suggest probably more the left, because that's where he ran the game from against Luton. I would think that because the thing with him drifting over to the left is that it gives him that chance to come back in on that right foot. Whereas he's not really a go for the byline type player like Tom Fellows is. So you don't really want him on the right hand side. He played it for us a few times, but they were usually games like away at Leeds, where we wanted him there for his defensive ability to sort of back up Darnell Furlong. He wasn't really on that right hand side for his offensive ability. I think if you're looking for Price to be an offensive threat, and he's going to be drifting off to a side, you want it to be the left-hand side so that he can come back in on his right foot. You don't want
Price is left.
Exactly. So the Price is not right, but you don't want him getting driven towards the touchline.
Absolutely. But then that raised the question of, what does the future hold for Mikey Johnston? Because this is a supremely gifted footballer. I love his technical ability and some of the footwork that he can come up with. And I would always think that at this level there's going to be a place for somebody like him. But is that question mark? Do you think about fit for how Ryan Mason might want to approach things?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very interesting one. What happens with Mikey Johnston, because he was gone. The deal was done, and we don't quite know what happens with what happened. I've seen stuff written about fan backlash in Brazil, that the fans didn't want him and the club backed down on the deal because of that. Whatever it was, I think it's a real shame, because I think he was getting a phenomenal move to an unbelievable side who, and I think, the Club World Cup has not necessarily been a great thing for all the reasons Jurgen Klopp outlined, but I think one of the huge positives of the Club World Cup is I think it's opened a lot of people's eyes to how awesome South American club football is, and how brilliant the support is out there, and how big some of these clubs are. And I think going out there would have been amazing for him. So I'm disappointed for him. I'm disappointed for the club, because I think it's a deal we wanted to happen. I think it was a very good financial deal for us. And I wonder whether it was all part of a plan. And I think him not going has scuppered that plan a little bit. What happens now is going to be very interesting. It's not out the question that he could stay, even if our plan is not to play with out-and-out wingers, because Mikey has been deployed in a 10 before. And especially if the plan is for the 10s to, at points, provide that width, he could still do that role. But as you quite rightly say, Isaac Price is to be the left-sided one of the two 10s,
Mm.
then that's a problem for Mikey Johnson, because I think Isaac Price starts over Mikey Johnson all day long. Maybe it gives Ryan Mason tactical flexibility to switch between wingerless and wingers. I don't know, but I don't think we're not really going to be able to carry a bloated squad. And I think that I think we are going to have to sort of make certain decisions, make certain concessions in certain areas of the squad. It'll be interesting to see whether the club becomes motivated to move Mikey on to somebody else. Because if they do, then that suggests to me that there is a real plan to play without wide men. If the club look to keep him and just basically the only reason he was going was because the money was right, then there's not a doubt in my mind that Mikey Johnston on his day is one of the best wingers in this division. He's absolutely frightening. His numbers for beating players were better than anybody else last season. His shot creating actions numbers are great.
Yeah.
And, we saw in his first spell when he came on loan that when he gets his shooting boots on, it's very difficult to stop him doing what he wants to do, because he creates that little bit of space for himself and then just drops the ball towards that far post, and it's tough to stop.
Yeah.
It's just, I suppose the big question is, and I don't have the answer to this, only Ryan Mason knows this, is whether tactically a player like Mikey Johnston is a part of what he wants to do.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to throw you a curveball here, Chris.
Wouldn't be you without one, Gab.
Absolutely. You mentioned how Mauricio Pochettino played with one conservative fullback, I guess, and one fullback that flies forward and is the one that provides the width. Could Tom Fellows be converted into a super attacking right back that's basically like an in-possession winger?
I think if we went to three centre halves, possibly, yeah. I could see that, and especially if Darnell Furlong was one of those three centre halves, because they actually link up really, really well. I don't think Tom Fellows could play right back in a four. I don't think he has the. I mean, it would take an awful lot of energy and effort to teach him that position, because I don't think he has the positional discipline for it. I mean, look, Isaac Price is an incredibly tactically astute player, and he's still got the game he had to play right back because we were decimated. He still gets caught out of position underneath the ball for their goal. And this is a player that is, as I've already evidenced, incredibly adaptable. So I don't think you can just slot players into fullback. I think people look at it as an easy position to play, and it's not. I think wing back, because you have that protection of the sort of right-sided centre half.
I think centre back might be the easiest position to play on the pitch.
I mean, Mason Holgate made it look pretty difficult last season. So, yeah, I don't know, mate. But look, what I would say is, I'm almost going to counter your question with a question.
Sure.
Why? Why would you do that? You've already got a player who, from being a wide midfielder and a winger, has got the most assists in the division and has got his value to somewhere around £15 million. Why would you keep him, make him more defensive, and by virtue of that, almost certainly devalue him? Because you are not going to get £15 million for a championship right back. You're just not.
True.
So I don't see the logic.
Makes sense to cash in then, doesn't it?
Yeah, the plan has got to be to sell Tom Fellows at some point. I don't see. I think if you go into this season with Tom Fellows in the team, you have to want Tom for purposes of his value as much as anything to at least match and ideally surpass last season's goal contributions tally. You probably want him to get more goals than he got, because he was quite low in terms of goals scored, and maybe you're happy to sacrifice a few assists for him getting a few goals, because obviously most teams want wide attackers that score rather than assist. And I think if he scores more, say he got to 10 goals next season and half as many assists, I actually think his value goes up. because suddenly he's a goal-scoring wide man. But I think if he's a flying wing back, he could be the best flying wing back in the league, and I still don't think he's worth he won't be worth 15 million quid, which is probably what he's worth right about now. So I could see the logic in terms of his attributes, why you would say that. But in terms of where we are as a club and our finances and the challenge we're having with PSR, it would make zero sense to devalue Tom in that way for me.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's take a look at the attack then, Chris. You've got, let's have a look. You've got Josh Marger there, who's had a pretty good season last year, I think. You've got Daryl DK in the mix as well. You've got Orne Hegbo and...
Owner Hegeba.
One Hegeba.
Owner Hegeba. It is
One
pronounced,
Hegeba. Carlan Grant, I suppose, is more of a withdrawn forward, isn't he? So how are you feeling about your options at top at the moment?
If it stays as it is, I think in terms of centre forwards, I think we're done. You missed Devante Cole off, by the way, mate. Absolutely shocking omission. Can't imagine why you forgot Devante Cole played for us. It must have something to do with the 163 minutes he managed to amass last season. But yeah, I think if Maja, DK, obviously Hegeber's going to stay because we've just signed him. But if Maja and DK both stay, I don't really see why we would need to do an awful lot of work in terms of centre forward, especially if Grant stays, because he can play there as well. And we've just brought in a young lad, and I know the intention is probably to put him in the 21s, but a young lad from Harrogate called Jack Bray that we've just brought in as well, who again, you know, if we were desperate and we'd got a few injuries in that area, we could always stick him on the bench or something like that. And I suppose you can always battle your way through to January and do a loan, which is pretty much what we had to do last season. Well, we had to do two and bring in Lancashire and Armstrong. So I don't see us, if Maja and DK stay, doing a lot more business in that area. And if Maja and DK stay, and I include the relegated clubs in this, I'm not sure there's many teams who have three better strikers than us. I think Maja, you say he had a good season last season. He had a good half a season because that's all he was fit for. And he still got, he got 12 goals in 22.8 90s. You know, I mean, that's phenomenal, Gab. That's, you know, it's more than a goal and a goal every other 90, a goal, it's about a goal every 160 minutes, something like that. Which is absolutely phenomenal. Daryl DK has proven when he's been on the pitch that he is a fantastic striker at this level. The problem with Daryl DK is he's not been on the pitch enough. But it was great to see him come back on the final day, get a goal. That was a really emotional moment for him. And I think, you know, he's finally having that proper pre-season as well. It's noticeable the club are putting him up quite a little bit. So I think there's a lot of hope around DK. So I think we're all excited about Hegerberg. Good scoring record at SK Brann. Looks like a good profile of striker for the Championship. Apparently really worked on his body a couple of years ago because he got a bit bullied in the Norwegian League. So he hit the gym and really sort of bulked out. And now they call him the Hulk because he really puts people about and stuff like that. So I think he could be a bit of a surprise package in this division. I think, you know, he's quick, he's strong, he's good in the air, he shoots with both feet, he gets shots off early. I think he could be one to watch. The only question mark is whether Maja and DK stay, because both are in the last year of their deal. DK,
and again, you want to trade, you want to sell players on.
Well, you do, but at the same time, look, DK's a difficult one because we paid a lot of money for him. So from a PSR point of view, you have to get a certain amount to actually make a PSR profit. And the question has got to be who pays a good amount of money for Daryl DK, given the minutes that he's had on the pitch.
It's too long ago. Like his best season was 4 years ago. It's too long.
Well, let's put it this way, Gab. In the last two seasons, so 23, 24, 24, 25, he's had a total of 3.190s across the last two seasons. I don't see why anybody pays good money for Daryl DK. I think what teams will look to do is they will keep an eye on how Daryl DK starts this season, and if we don't negotiate a new contract with him and he's played a lot of games up to January, and obviously at that point he can negotiate with teams abroad, that maybe teams then start saying, right, let's think about getting Daryl DK on a pre-contract free transfer in the summer. But I'm not sure I see DK going, because I don't see where the market is for him. It'd be way too much of a gamble. Maja's an interesting one as to whether or not he stays, because, as I say, 12 goals in 22.890s is really, really good and really, really impressive. But the other side of it, from Maja's point of view, is again injuries. In that, he played half a season last season, but then 23-24 was injured so much that he only played 2.290s. Again, does anyone take a gamble on paying good money for a guy who's got 25 90s in over the last 2 years? And the other thing is, Josh Maja has a history of running down his contract and leaving clubs for free. It might be in Josh Maja's best interest to get the best deal for himself, that he sees out the year. I see a situation where both stay, but I think Maja's the question mark, because I think there'll be a market for him. I think somebody towards the end of the window might, especially if Maja starts well like he did last season, obviously a hat trick on the opening day and everything, there's a possibility that somebody in the Premier League will go, well, we haven't got a striker yet. That guy's only got 1 year left. Albion will probably let him go for a reasonable amount of money, as opposed to other guys where we'd have to fork out 15, 20, maybe even 30, 40 million. Maybe somebody gambles on him towards the end of the window. But DK, I don't see where the market is. The guy's, like I say, played 3 games in 2 years. I don't see anybody risking money and a 2 or 3 year contract on somebody like that until they've proved their fitness.
Makes a lot of sense. So in terms of additions then, Chris, it's obviously going to depend on outgoings. I think you need a fullback on either side. I think midfield looks pretty good, doesn't it, with Malumbi, which we've not even talked about. Price, of course, you're a massive fan of. So, I mean, it looks like the squad's we're only looking at 2 or 3 more additions if nobody else goes.
It sort of depends. I mean, yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think we definitely need a fullback at least. I mean, if you get somebody versatile, maybe one player can cover both sides. But I agree with you. We need something. We were linked to Ethan Pye of Stockport a few weeks back.
Yeah, very talented.
Loved that idea. Loved that idea, but don't know whether that was all absolute rubbish. We might have. It might be a custard pie for our ITKs. That one. If you're going to do the puns, so am I. But,
absolutely, yeah.
but yeah, and look, I've talked a lot on our pod about. I love Ethan Galbraith at Leyton Orient. I mean, if we're talking right back targets, and I know he's a guy who can play central midfield as well, gives you that versatility. If Furlong's playing every week, he's somebody that you could play in another position. I know he got linked with Charlton a few weeks back, and I think
going to have to break your heart, Chris.
Has he gone somewhere?
He's gone to Swansea.
Oh, well, there you go. Ruined. Sorry, I didn't even see that one. This is how consumed with my new little one I've been. I've been out the loop of. Well, they've got a very good player, and that is sad for me, because I really like him. But we need something on that right hand side. Furlong's had no competition for years and years. As I say, and we really, it's been a bit of a sort of dry area for our academy as well. Really, fullbacks. We had obviously we had Taylor Gardner Hickman come through, and then he turned out to be more of a centre mid than a fullback. And then we obviously had
Ethan Ingram, didn't you?
We had Ashworth on the left-hand side, but he didn't really look good enough. And then Ethan Ingram, and again, massively struggled in Carabao Cup games and didn't really look good enough. So, yeah, it's been while we've been quite fertile in other areas, with wingers like like Tom Fellows, and we've got a couple of other good wingers coming through. I think we've got a couple of decent centre forwards. We've been massively good with goalkeepers, to the point where Ted Can, a goalkeeper that I think a lot of people rated, has ended up going out to Rotherham because there's just no room for him in our squad. And centre halves like Caleb Taylor, there's not really been the sort of the fullbacks coming through. So I think it's probably somewhere where we need to sign, because I don't think there's anybody massively on the cusp that we're blocking their pathway anyway.
Sure.
Plus, Darnell Furlong, with the best will in the world, he's 28. He's not going on forever. So we do need a long-term succession plan for him as well. So yeah, I think we need that. I think what else we need in the squad kind of depends how Mason wants to play, because if he wants to play with wingers, then we are quite light. If he wants to play with 10s, then we probably need to move on Johnston and Fellows and probably invest in that area there, to be honest. If he wants to play 2 centre halves, then as things stand, we've got 4 centre backs, so we're not in a particularly bad place. Plus Furlong, who could potentially tuck in there, and Diakite, who's also played centre half in the past, granted in a 3. But I think we've got a bit there. But again, there's rumours Caleb Taylor was linked with Millwall a few weeks back, so whether he stays. Carl Bartley, there's been constant rumours about him going. Not again, sort of one a bit of a sort of finger in the eye for some of the ITKs, that one. But yeah, I don't know. I still think there's a bit of movement in Albion. Andrew Nestor said in Ryan Mason's press conference that we wouldn't be as heavily turning over the squad as last summer. This summer,
I think that's a good thing. Yeah, I'm wondering.
But I think there's still business to be done. I think, and there's still player trading to be done.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just wanted to briefly touch on the midfield. Do you think that, in an era where there are some areas of a squad where there are some areas of uncertainty with new manager, is the Mowat and Malumbi axis the one that's pretty safe, or do you think Price is going to play one of the other positions, or do you think he's going to play one of those deeper roles?
It depends how we set up. Depends how we set up, because I mean, if we set up the same way as Corberan and mostly Mowbray did last season, with Fellows one side, Johnston the other, you could play Banny in the 10 and you could play Price deeper, which obviously then potentially dislodges one of Malumbi and Mowat. I think Mowat gets underrated by our fan base, because I think people focus on what he can't do, which is, the dynamism aspect.
Yeah,
but I think he's passing
very well, can he?
I mean, he uses his body extremely well, but he's just not. He doesn't bash about the pitch, like Jason Malumbi does. But I don't think you get a lot of central midfielders at this level who can do everything, because there's a reason they're in the Championship.
Of course.
I think that I think that Alex Mowat, I think at the age he's at, needs to probably not be asked to play quite as many minutes as he has been the last 2 seasons. He's obviously coming on for 30. I think he had a little operation a couple of seasons ago. I mean, we again dragged sort of like 37 90s out of him last season. 39 starts in there. It's a lot, and I think we need to not ask him to do that. And the problem there is, at the moment, if Price is to play one of the 10s, then your 3 deeper midfielders are Diakite, Malumbi and Mowat. Diakite and Malumbi would lack any range of passing whatsoever. And I think that would be a big, big problem. So I wouldn't want to see those 2 paired. I think for me, I still think we're possibly one signing away in that position, unless Mason has looked at Harry Whitwell and thought he's ready.
Yeah.
In which case it could be Mowat and Harry Whitwell. I think you play either Diakite or Malumbi in the other one. I think at the moment you've either got Mowat or Price, but if the plan is to consistently play Price further forward, I think you need another option there.
Yeah, I like the idea of just leaving those pathways open for some of those young players to sort of grow a little bit ahead of schedule, because I think that's part of how you create value in a squad, and sometimes that does mean being a bit brave. And I like that West Bromwich Albion see that.
Maybe, but I suppose the other side of that particular coin is, Gab, that if you do that, and the guy ends up not really getting a sniff for much of the season because the guys in front of him play well and keep their place and everything like that, and maybe he gets 100, 200 minutes over the course of a season, it feels like a year wasted out of his development where he potentially could have gone to League One and played every week and really developed.
I can see how a loan could benefit somebody like Harry Whitwell, but I don't see that it'd be wasted, because I think if you're around the first team environment and you're training with top players, then I think that can bring its own benefit. So I think you make a good point.
No, I see that. All I'm saying is, in the last few years where we've seen players really come on, it's normally after a pretty well chosen loan, whether that's Caleb Taylor at Cheltenham and Wickham, whether that's Tom Fellows at Crawley, whether it's Josh Griffiths at Bristol Rovers,
Cheltenham again.
Yeah, and Alex Palmer doing well at a number of different clubs as well. I think what we've seen is we've actually used the loan market really, really well to develop our talent. And I think I get what you're saying. I completely get the point about having players around a first team environment, but I still think there's no substitute for playing games in a really in the really competitive environment that is the EFL, which unfortunately the PL2 cannot match.
Of course. Expectations for West Bromwich Albion this season, Chris. You've mentioned that you don't think West Brom are going to be one of the first 4 teams in the league this season. You're going to be competing for one of the lower 2 playoff spots. But what for you would constitute a good season for West Brom? And what's the kind of the minimum expectation that you'd be prepared to sort of accept, if you like?
I think I don't necessarily want to judge it too much on league position, Gab. In terms, I think the minimum expectation for me is that we see the start of something exciting under Ryan Mason. Now, whether we get there into the playoffs or not, I think I don't necessarily think we should judge it as make or break. The problem with last season was, it wasn't the fact that we missed out on the playoffs, it was how we did it.
Yeah.
And because if for example, like I say, Sunderland had a season of sort of almost transition of turning over from an slightly older, more experienced team to making the whole thing younger. They miss out on the playoffs after a bit of a poor run towards the end of it, and then go on and have the amazing season they had last season and end up getting promoted. So I don't necessarily see that if we miss out on the playoffs, it's some sort of disaster. I think the trajectory that the club is on in terms of its finances and sorting everything out means that if we miss out on the playoffs, we probably get another crack at it the next year. It's not like we'll get gutted in the summer and we won't be able to replace those players, and this was our one shot at promotion. I don't think that's I don't think that's the path we're on. I think the owners are building towards one day us being that Ipswich, that Sunderland, who gets in and amongst those relegated teams and sort of gets in the mix.
Sure.
Whether that will be next season or not, I'm not convinced, because I think we're just at the start of that journey. We've got a very young coach. We're bringing in a number of young players. They might adapt really, really well. And I think, probably if you ask people honestly around Sunderland Football Club, I think they would probably consider themselves ahead of schedule for where they are. I think probably a lot of those young players just adapted a lot faster than they thought they would do. Yeah. And that could be us. That could be us. But if it's not the end of the world for me. So I think where would I like to be? Sneaking into the playoffs, 5th or 6th. And I think given the sort of the work that we're doing, I think that would be an enormous success. I think as long as we don't have a horrible season where it's a bit nothingy and we miss out on the playoffs largely because the players just genuinely don't look good enough. That's a problem. Or the manager doesn't look good enough. That's a problem. But I think if we have a good season, but maybe just don't quite have enough at that business end of the season, which, like I say, was Sunderland's season 2 years ago, and we end up finishing 9th or something like that, I won't lose any sleep about it, because I'll go to bed in summer 2026 and say, okay, we'll go one better next season. But what I want to see is, I want to see players like Hegerberg, Price, Banny, coming on this year. Josh Griffiths as well, and I want to see that. And I want to see that the manager is developing as a manager as well. And I think if I see all of that, and it means we end up finishing 8th or 9th or something like that, I won't be too horribly wounded about that. Obviously, if we make the playoffs, I'll be delighted. And I stand by what I said before. I think it's too big a ask to probably be. I consider top 4 to be automatic mix, and I think it's probably too big a ask for us to be in the automatic conversation this season.
That makes a lot of sense. So, as you know, I'm doing my 1 to 24s this month, and one of my processes for that this year, Chris, is to rate each team out of 10 on 14 different categories that I think are going to determine their fate. So what I'm going to do is shout a category at you, and you can give me a number between 1 and 10.
Okay, go for it.
First category is ownership.
Yeah, I mean, it's early days, but from what I've seen so far, like 8.5, probably. Yeah. Call it an 8 because they got the Mowbray hire wrong. Let's call it an 8.
Okay. An 8 for Shillan Patel and co. Infrastructure is the next one.
Again, work in progress, but they're doing all the right things. I'll say a sort of 7.5 now, but if you ask me in a year's time, I'll probably go at least another point up on that, because they're working on it.
Playing budget relative to the rest of the championship.
That's 6, I would think. It's really impossible for me to say, Gab, because we're not cash poor, we're PSR poor. So if we sold Tom Fellows tomorrow, then we can probably compete with most people who haven't got parachute payments. But look, we've just spent sort of like, about 4 million quid on a striker, so we're not poor. I would say it depends where you're ranking the parachute payment teams. We're below them, so whatever score you're giving them, give us 1 less. I think we're at about 7.
But you're not 9 out of 10 on budget, so I'll say no. I think 7 or 8 possibly.
I think 7, because I think we're in a position where we need to sell.
Okay, 7 for budget. Management.
I don't know, mate. I've never seen him manage a game. Look, let's just stick it at a 6 for the moment. But that I don't want anyone to take that disrespect.
No,
I just haven't seen him take a game. So how can I give the guy more than that when I've never seen him manage a game of football?
Makes sense. Goalkeeping unit.
Still a little bit of jury's out. Probably based on last season, about a 6.5. But again, if Josh Griffiths develops, that might be an 8 by the end of the season.
Defense.
I think Nat Phillips is a really good signing. I think Hegam's possibly the best centre half in the league. Furlong and Styles are good on their day, but there's no backups. So a 7 because I like the starters, but I think we're lacking depth.
Okay. Midfield.
I mean, if we're counting sort of Price and Banny in there, again, probably about a 7. Malumbi and Mowat, are they a midfield 2 that gets you promoted or near to getting promoted? The problem is, in the last couple of seasons, the answer has been no to that question.
Attack.
As I say, if we go in at this moment in time, at time of recording, Hegerber, Maja, DK, Fellows, Johnston, Grant. That's a 9, mate. But will Johnston be here at the end of the window? Will Fellows be here at the end of the window? Will Maja be here at the end of the window? So it's a 9 right now. But you might have to alter that score if people start getting sold.
Should we put it down for an 8?
Well, as it stands at the minute, you've got to go with... I maintain there's not a better 3 strikers in the league.
Okay. All right, let's go for a 9 then. Squad depth.
6 at the moment, because we've only brought 2 players in. We've let I think 3 go, but we've had loans leave as well. I think we're fairly light on the ground. We need backup in a number of positions.
Of course. Squad stability.
I don't really know what you mean by that.
Oh, sorry. I mean, a group that's been together for a while and has a bit of a synergy and, has a sort of an understanding, I guess, with continuity, I suppose. 5,
because our leadership group, and I use air quotes, needs ripping up because they let down the last manager, likes of Bartley and Furlong and Mowat. Not good what we saw at the end of last season.
Okay. Growth potential, players you think can be a lot better next season and are on an upward trajectory?
I mean, 8.5 probably. I think Josh Griffiths, it depends how many of them we keep, but Josh Griffiths, Caleb Taylor, Tom Fellows, DK still hasn't had, a proper run of games as a West Bromwich Albion player. Isaac Price could be anything. Banny, Hegerber, there's so many in our squad who could be anything next season.
Team spirit.
Well, based on the end of last season, it looked like a sort of 5. But yeah, I think it will. I think Nat Phillips has been brought in to be a bit of a leader. I think we will see more leadership brought into the group and I think we will probably see some of the players who possibly weren't the best around the group move on.
Hopefully something for Ryan Mason to address. Fitness.
I don't think we necessarily had mega fitness issues last season, but Ryan Mason has made it he's constantly said fitness. You need that to get through a championship season. So where I think we will be, I think we'll be like an 8 or a 9 on that, because I think Mason, it's a real part of his MO.
I'll put an 8.5 for that. And finally, quality.
It's a real mix. We've got some real top quality players in terms of Price, Fellows, Maja, and then you've got other players who are possibly a bit more limited. Malumbi, Bartley, people like that. I think it's. I think again, outside of probably the parachute clubs, I think we've probably got some of the most quality. I think we're probably about a 7.5.
7.5 for quality. Lovely stuff. Thank you for that. So some final quick fire questions from me then, Chris, before we wrap up. Biggest reason to believe in West Bromwich Albion right now?
The ownership and the fact that there's a plan. I think that's the biggest reason to believe in us. It's the fact that for the first time in a long time, I think we've got a really clear plan and identity to who we want to be as a football club.
Biggest reason for doubt?
Having a totally inexperienced manager. I like him. I like what he's saying, but the bottom line is he has 13 games as a caretaker manager under his belt, and you can have all the belief in the world in him, but until he has actually proven himself as an out there on his own number one, there's always got to be that annoying inkling of doubt. Makes
a lot of sense. And finally, give me a prediction for where you think next season might be heading for West Brom. Do you think you'll make the top 6 if you had to make the prediction right now?
No, I probably wouldn't, because like I say, you've got you've got 4 clubs with parachute payments and then Blues with an awful lot of money to spend as well. And I genuinely see a situation where that could cannibalise 5 out of the 6 places, which leaves the rest of us really, really fighting for scraps. And do I think we could be the best of the rest with a young manager and a big squad turnover? Maybe, if it all comes together. But I think it would be incredibly optimistic of me to say that will happen. So probably 8th would be, if I was, when I pull together my 1 to 24s, that's probably where I will have us, which is about, I think I got a position bang on last season, which was 9th. So 8th, 9th, probably similar to last season, but I think it's all about how this season feels rather than, for me anyway. Some fans will be, the be all and end all will be points on the board, wins and league table. For me, it's about seeing progress in the right direction as a club.
Hopefully we can see that. Chris, it's been such a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for giving me your insight from Albion Analysis this evening. Really appreciate your time. Everyone get subscribed to Albion Analysis. You can also subscribe to EFL Debate on YouTube and on Spotify. That would really help us out. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you again for another Summer Deep Dive.
My pleasure, Gab, and apologies to anybody viewing that I've got darker and darker as the light switch is too far away from me for me to turn it on. So,
next time it'd be like a car park in a ominous.
I need one of those Instagram rings that the sort of Insta models all use. I need something like that.
Absolutely. Top stuff, Chris. Thanks, everybody.